Welcome to 6 Degrees of Wiki, a podcast where two sisters find the 6 degrees of separation between Wikipedia articles that don't seem to have anything in common. I'm Nikki.
And I'm Rosanna. Today we'll fall into a Wikipedia spiral where Nikki has just 6 rounds to figure out how the first article could possibly be connected to the last, while learning all sorts of peculiar facts along the way. Let's get started. So far this month, we've spiraled from Cate Blanchett to Shirley Jackson.
Round 1.
Today we are spiraling from Shirley Jackson to the Great Irish Famine.
Oh.
Yeah. Shirley Jackson was an American writer known for horror and mystery. The Great Famine of Ireland was a time of mass starvation, disease, and immigration out of Ireland from 1845 to 1849. Nikki, do you see anything that these 2 degrees have in common?
I don't know if Shirley Jackson was Irish, and their years don't overlap at all.
Nope.
Okay, Shirley Jackson loved to eat potatoes. I am making up this fact. It's fact with quotation marks around it.
Fact with quotation marks.
That's the best I can do. Maybe in her first draft of the story, The Lottery, people were stoned with potatoes.
Then they would have been potatoed.
People were potatoed. I'm going to hell.
That is pretty bad.
It is very bad. Please, Rosanna, let's find out how they're connected, so I don't have to embarrass myself any longer.
Please stop talking about being potatoed. So, as we discussed in last week's episode, Shirley Jackson was an American writer known for horror and mystery stories. She wrote 6 novels, 2 memoirs, and over 200 short stories, several of which were published after she passed away. She didn't really like to discuss her work with the public. This is a quote from her from 1955. "I very much dislike writing about myself or my work, and when pressed for autobiographical material, I can only give a bare chronological outline, which contains, naturally, no pertinent facts. I was born in San Francisco in 1916 and spent most of my early life in California. I was married in 1940 to Stanley Edgar Hyman, and we lived in Vermont in a quiet rural community with fine scenery and comfortably far away from city life. Our major exports are books and children, both of which we produce in abundance." I think she just sounds like she was a really interesting person.
Yeah.
So, Jackson was born in 1916 in San Francisco. She was raised in an affluent middle-class suburb. She had a fairly strained relationship with her mother, and she spent a lot of time during her childhood writing. She attended the University of Rochester, but she didn't like it there, so she took off a year, and then she transferred to Syracuse University, where she actually did really well, a lot better. She got involved in the campus literary magazine, and she met her husband, Stanley Hyman, who would become a noted literary critic. Later in life, she was overweight and a heavy smoker and in pretty poor health. She had heart problems and was seeing a psychiatrist for anxiety. She was prescribed barbiturates and amphetamines over the course of her life, which likely aggravated her heart condition. She also started drinking, but she did continue to write. Eventually, she died of heart failure at age 48.
Man, so young.
So young. So sad. Interesting fact about Shirley Jackson and her husband, Shirley and Stanley were enthusiastic readers, and their personal library was estimated to have over 100,000 books. Their personal library. That's
just massive.
Can you imagine being one of her kids and having to go through that after she passed away? Good grief.
That's probably why it took them so long to find all those extra stories that she wrote.
Yeah, they're like, all right, now go check the barn behind the house.
Round 2.
Okay, Nikki, what do you think the next degree is?
You named a couple of states that stood out, Vermont and New York. New York stood out especially because I know so many Irish immigrants came to New York. I'm going with New York.
Your guess of New York is... You're killing me. Close.
Oh, no.
But
is
also
it Vermont?
Not close at all. Because the next degree is San Francisco.
That's not anywhere near New York, Rosanna.
I know, but they're like both locations, so locationally,
yes.
You were, on the right track. San Francisco is a city and a county. It is the cultural, commercial, and financial center of Northern California. It's almost 47 square miles and is located at the end of the San Francisco Peninsula in the San Francisco Bay Area. It's the 4th most populous city in California and the 13th most populous in the United States, with an estimated population of 884,000 people.
I would have thought it was bigger.
Well, this is just like city of San Francisco.
Proper.
Yeah. It's got the 7th highest income in the United States, which seems high, I thought.
Tech for you.
Oh, that's true.
Yeah, with all that Silicon Valley.
It was founded on June 29th, 1776, which is my birthday.
Not 1776, but...
A few hundred years later, couple hundred years later, yeah. The California Gold Rush of 1849 caused rapid growth in the area, making it the largest city on the West Coast at that time. That's also where the name the 49ers came from.
Oh.
Quarter of the city was destroyed in the 1906 San Andreas Fault earthquake and subsequent fires, but it was quickly rebuilt and hosted the Panama Pacific International Exposition only 9 years later. It was a major port during World War II, and many service members shipped out from there. After the war, there was an influx of returning servicemen and immigrants, leading to liberalizing attitudes and the hippie counterculture.
Oh.
San Francisco was considered a center for liberal activism and was a home for the gay rights movement. It has a long LGBT positive history and hosts the San Francisco Pride, one of the largest and oldest pride parades. It is an event that has been held continuously since 1972. Some of the tourist attractions are the Golden Gate Bridge, Alcatraz, Fisherman's Wharf, and Chinatown. It's known for its eclectic mix of architecture, and it's home to companies like Levi's, Fitbit, Reddit, Pinterest, Twitter, Craigslist, and Uber. Here's an interesting fact about San Francisco. It is the highest rated American city on the World Livability Ranking, which is the most livable cities in the world based on an annual survey of living conditions. It also has a minority-majority population, meaning non-Hispanic whites make up less than half of the population at 42%. Round 3. Okay, Nikki, what do you think the next degree is?
I wrote down some items.
Okay.
Like San Andreas Fault.
Yes.
Can't seem to find anything there that would connect it. Alcatraz, not really anything.
Okay.
California Gold Rush, maybe. Because that was maybe around the same time, but I'm not quite sure. It's the famine. I'm going to go with that one because that one sounds pretty interesting.
Okay. Sorry, what was it? California Gold Rush?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm guessing that means it's not right.
Your guess of the California Gold Rush is incorrect. The next degree is Alcatraz.
But it has nothing to do... Fine.
Does it?
Okay.
Or does it? Yeah. Okay.
My whole month is like this, isn't it? I'm just a little off.
Right there.
I mean, I guess that's me anyway.
Alcatraz is officially Alcatraz Federal Penitentiary. It is on Alcatraz Island, also called The Rock.
I know that because of the movie with Sean Connery and Nicolas Cage.
I mean, that was a good movie. Just, it was.
That was a good movie.
Alcatraz was a maximum high-security federal prison on Alcatraz Island, which is 1.25 miles off the coast of San Francisco. It operated from August 1934 to March 1963. The main building was actually built in 1910 as a U.S. military prison. Then it was acquired by the U.S. Department of Justice in 1933. The buildings were modernized to meet requirements for a top-security prison. And they had housing for the prison staff and their families, which, yeah.
Yeah.
high security and location near cold water and strong currents gave the operators the faith that it was escape-proof.
Mm-hmm.
It was designed to hold people that were causing a lot of trouble at other federal penitentiaries, sort of as a last resort prison to hold the worst of the worst criminals who had no hope of rehabilitation. And many notorious criminals spent time there over the years, like Al Capone, Alvin Creepy Karpis, George Machine Gun Kelly, Bumpy Johnson, and Robert Franklin Stroud, the Birdman of Alcatraz.
Oh.
Of the 36 inmates who staged 14 escape attempts over the 29 years that Alcatraz served as a federal pen, 23 were recaptured, 6 were shot and killed, 2 drowned, and 5 are listed as missing and presumed drowned.
They got away.
Today, the penitentiary is a tourist attraction and a public museum with about 1.5 million visitors annually. And there have been several movies based on Alcatraz or with Alcatraz as the setting. It appears in video games, songs, books, episodes of TV shows, and there was a TV series called Alcatraz in 2012, which I had never heard of.
Me neither.
Not to mention all the biographies that were written about the various inmates. An interesting fact about Alcatraz, it's considered to be one of the most haunted places in the United States. Native Americans described evil spirits on the island before there was even a prison built there.
Oh.
Mark Twain visited Alcatraz at one point and said it was as cold as winter, even in the summer, which I think was probably because of the water, but maybe it was ghosts. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it was made of stone, surrounded by very cold water.
Yeah.
I would expect it to be chilly, with no windbreaks.
Right. Officials from Alcatraz dismissed the report of ghosts. In 1994, an official said, "These ridiculous ghost stories will stop tourists from visiting," which...
Seems like the opposite would happen.
I think that's probably why a lot of people go.
Yeah.
Round 4.
Okay, Nikki, what do you think the next degree is?
I wrote down 2 names.
Okay.
Al Capone and Mark Twain.
Okay.
And because even if either one of those is right, I'm probably going to pick the wrong one. I'm just going to guess Al Capone.
Okay. Your guess of Al Capone is incorrect.
Okay.
The next degree is Alvin Creepy Karpis.
Of course it is. The weirdest name in the list. Why was he creepy? That's what I want to know.
Alvin Creepy Karpis was born Alvin Karpivicius. He lived from 1907 to 1979. He was nicknamed Creepy for his sinister smile.
Oh.
And was called Ray by fellow gang members. I don't know how they got Ray from Alvin Karpis, but whatever. He was a Depression-era gangster.
Oh. Like Al Capone.
Yes, exactly. He was one of only 4 people given the title Public Enemy No. 1 by the FBI, and he was the only one that was taken alive.
I didn't know that was a real title.
Yes.
I've only ever seen it in fiction.
He spent more time at Alcatraz than any other prisoner. He was there for 26 years.
Oh. Wow.
He was born in Canada to Lithuanian immigrants and was raised in Topeka, Kansas. He was super smart and had a photographic memory. He started committing crimes and hanging out with gamblers and bootleggers when he was 10, because that's what you do. In 1926, he went to prison in Kansas for the first time for attempted burglary, and he escaped with another inmate. Then he was caught stealing a car, so he was sent back to prison. After about a year, he met Fred Barker, who was one of the Bloody Barkers. He was released in 1931, and then he and Fred started the Barker Karpis gang. They were ruthless, killed anyone that got in their way, including innocent bystanders, because they're terrible people.
Oh.
When Fred's brother Doc was released from prison for murder, he joined the gang, and then they had another about 25 members. In 1933, they started kidnapping rich people for ransom.
Goodness.
Fred died in a shootout with police in 1935, and Karpis almost did too, but managed to escape. But his 8 months pregnant girlfriend was hit by a wild shot in the thigh, so she got captured.
Oh.
She was sentenced to 5 years in prison, and Karpis' parents adopted the baby boy. J. Edgar Hoover was the head of the FBI at the time, and he made it his mission to capture Karpis personally. Karpis was located and arrested in New Orleans in 1936. A couple of versions of the arrest have been reported. Karpis's version, which was told in his memoirs, was that Hoover only came out after all the other agents had seized him, and then the agents called Hoover over when it was safe to approach the car. The official FBI version states that Hoover reached into the car and grabbed Karpis before he could reach for a rifle in the back seat. In fact, the car, a Plymouth coupe, didn't have a back seat. So, yeah. The scene was further confused when Hoover told his men to put the handcuffs on him, but none of the agents had brought handcuffs. So Karpis was tied up with one of the FBI agents' necktie.
Oh my gosh. Is this the movie? Please tell me somebody made this into a movie at some point.
Karpis was tried and sentenced to life in prison and sent to Alcatraz, where he mainly worked in the bakery, but he frequently got in fights with other prisoners. Because that's what you do, you know?
Bread fights.
He was released on parole in 1969 at the age of 62 and was deported to Canada. He had trouble getting a passport because he had had his fingerprints removed in 1934 by a mob doctor. He wrote his memoirs in 1971 and did a book tour.
I'm amazed that he got out on parole after all the people he killed.
I know. Here's an interesting fact. In 1962, when Alcatraz was being prepped to close, Karpis was transferred to McNeil Island Penitentiary in Washington, where he met a 28-year-old Charles Manson, and he taught him how to play the guitar.
I'm really glad the sentence ended that way. I thought it was going to be a lot worse. I was afraid of what he taught him.
He just taught him how to play the guitar. And actually, Charles Manson wanted to have, like, a music career. I mean, he didn't.
Oh, I wish he had gone that route instead.
Round 5. All right, Nikki, what do you think the next degree is? We just have a couple more to go. Okay.
You said his parents were immigrants, and the Irish famine caused a lot of people to emigrate to other places, like the U.S. You also said bootleggers. And I know that you can make some alcohol from potatoes, and potatoes were the big famine thing because of there was some blight. I don't know. And also, Irish people are supposed to like alcohol a lot. I can say that because I'm Irish. I shouldn't say that anyway. So the whole bootlegger thing, I don't know. Maybe, but I think immigrants seems like the better bet, so I'm going with immigrants.
Okay. Your guess of immigrants is incorrect, and quite a stretch.
Okay. All right, fine.
The next degree is Lithuanians.
I thought about that one. I'm like, there's no way it's anywhere near Lithuania.
Is there anyway?
Oh, Rosanna.
Oh, Rosanna. All right. Lithuanians are a Baltic ethnic group native to Lithuania. There are 2.5 million there, and then another million in the Lithuanian diaspora found in the US, Argentina, Brazil, Canada, Colombia, Russia, the United Kingdom, and Ireland. The largest part being in the United States. Their native language is Lithuanian, and for the most part, they're Roman Catholic. Certain territories consider the Lithuanian language to be non-prestigious, so they spoke Polish. Less and less people spoke Lithuanian. Then the Imperial Russian occupation moved that along by issuing a ban on speaking or writing in Lithuanian. So, of course, people started to get worried that the language would become extinct.
Yeah.
Then at the end of the 19th century, a cultural and linguistic revival happened. Then Lithuania declared its independence after World War I, and that also helped keep the culture and the language alive.
Yay!
Lithuania was occupied by the Soviet Union in 1940, then by Germany during World War II, then back under the Soviet Union when the Germans retreated, then regained their independence in 1990, and became a member of the European Union in 2004. Their national sport is basketball.
Oh, yeah. Because I have heard of the basketball team.
And they won bronze medals in the Summer Olympics in 1992, 1996, and 2000. Their cuisine includes dumplings and crepes, potato pudding, stuffed potatoes, cabbage and noodles, and pork dishes. An interesting fact about Lithuanians. Like most other Baltic and Scandinavian cultures, they've been known for being people of above average height. At the end of the 19th century, their average height of males was 5'4", and females was 5 foot. By the end of the 20th century, their heights averaged 5'11" for males and 5'6" for females.
Wow. That's a big jump.
Round 6. What do you think the last degree is before we get to the Great Famine of Ireland?
I'm stuck between a rock and a hard place.
Okay.
My rock is called Ireland, and my hard place is called potato.
I thought the rock was the potato, though, because people got potatoed.
That's right. My rock is a potato, and my hard place is Ireland. And Ireland can be a hard place. That makes way more sense.
Yeah.
I didn't think through my metaphor. Sorry. I'm going to pick potato, but only because you just did a country.
Okay.
So Ireland would be a lot. Also, I know how much you like potatoes and things made from potatoes.
I love potatoes.
So I feel like that is probably the smart choice here.
Okay.
Potatoes.
Your guess of potatoes is deliciously incorrect.
Is it Ireland?
No.
What is it? Roman Catholic?
The next degree is Diaspora.
I can't believe you didn't choose to go with potato.
Potato wasn't a link in the beginning of the article.
All right, fine.
A diaspora is the scattered population of people whose origins are in a separate geographical location.
Okay.
It mainly refers to an involuntary mass exodus of a population from its indigenous territory. The word comes from the Greek verb for I scatter, which was kind of sad.
Yeah.
Most known examples are the Jews from Israel, the Greeks after the fall of Constantinople, Africans during the slave trade, the Romani from India, and the Irish during and after the Great Famine. Scholars recently have made distinctions between different types of diaspora based on the cause of the exodus. In 1991, political science professor William Safran gave the rules to distinguish between diasporas and migrant communities, and they include a collective memory of the homeland, regarding it as their true home, a plan to eventually return to it, and being committed to the restoration or maintenance of the homeland. They also have to relate personally to the homeland to a point that it shapes their identity. So they move to another place, but they're not trying to be like the new place. An interesting fact about diaspora, there can be something called an internal diaspora, where it's people moving from like one state to another in the United States.
Okay.
There's a Detroit diaspora in Seattle due to the layoffs in the auto industry. There's also a large group from Michigan that moved to Wyoming. And that leads us to our last degree, the Great Famine of Ireland. I'm going to preface this degree just with the note that this is a really sad article on Wikipedia.
All right.
The Great Famine of Ireland was also called the Great Hunger. It was a time of mass starvation, disease, and immigration out of Ireland from 1845 to 1849. Outside of Ireland, it's sometimes called the Irish Potato Famine. About 1 million people died, and another 1 million left Ireland.
Wow.
The population of the country decreased by as much as 25%.
Wow.
The cause of the famine was mostly potato blight, which was a microorganism that infects potatoes and tomato plants. The blight happened all through Europe in the 1840s, but the impact in Ireland was disproportionate because almost a third of the population relied solely on potatoes, not just for eating, but for their livelihood. The famine and its effects permanently changed Ireland's demographic, politics, and culture, and eventually it became a rallying point for Irish nationalists and their movement. It made the strained relationship that Ireland had with the British Crown even worse than it already was. The relationship was poor already because Irish Catholics were treated so badly. In the 17th and 18th century, they weren't allowed to purchase or lease land, or vote, or hold political office, or live within 5 miles of a corporate town, or obtain education, or pretty much anything else you need to be able to be successful.
I wonder why their relationship was strained.
It's weird, right? The law was reformed in 1793 and in 1829, but they were still poor and powerless. And that was even though they actually made up 80% of the population.
Oh my gosh.
They were tenants, and their landowners pretty much had unlimited power over them. The rent revenue collected from them was largely sent to England. Also, they were at-will tenants, so they could be tossed out at any time. And any improvements that they made became the property of the landlord with no compensation. So why bother?
That's ridiculous.
Yeah. 2/3 of the 8 million Irish depended on agriculture for their survival, but they rarely received a working wage. They had to work for their landlords in return for the patch of land that they needed to grow enough food for their families to eat, and potatoes were the only thing that they could grow enough of to sustain their families.
Oh.
Then, in 1846, a quarter of the crop was lost. Ireland didn't ask England for a handout, but they did ask for money to be sent to increase employment on railways and public works. The famine remains a controversial event in Irish history. The British government's response to the failure of the potato crop has been debated and discussed, and some have the belief that it constitutes genocide.
Wow.
Yeah. It's a pretty politically charged issue.
I think that's a reasonable belief.
I kind of think so, too.
Yeah.
Here is an interesting/appalling fact about the Great Famine. Throughout the famine, Ireland was still exporting huge quantities of food. Almost 4,000 vessels carried food from Ireland to ports in England during 1847, and that was the same year that 400,000 Irish people died of starvation.
Oh my gosh.
Some of the things that they were exporting were bacon, ham, peas, beans, onions, rabbit, salmon, lard, honey, and butter.
All things that could keep people alive.
Yeah, the problem in Ireland wasn't the lack of food, but it was the price of the food. The people growing it couldn't afford to buy it. So they starved.
Oh, yeah.
And on that note, we made it through all 6 degrees. We went from Shirley Jackson to San Francisco to Alcatraz to Alvin creepy Karpis to Lithuanians to Diaspora to the Great Famine of Ireland. Nikki, what did you think of this spiral?
I thought the end was really depressing.
I know, isn't it awful?
Sad.
But you can kind of understand now why the Irish have such an issue with England.
Yeah.
I didn't realize it was like that.
Definitely reasonable.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was so bad. But I really like the Alcatraz stuff. That was really interesting. Mm-hmm. Plus, I really need to see the movie of Mr. Creepy and J. Edgar Hoover.
And being handcuffed with a necktie. And now it's time for Cheek of the Week. This week we have 2 new reviews to read.
Yay!
Yay!
Something happy after something so sad.
I know! Our first review is from Moxie LaBouche of the podcast Your Brain on Facts. 5 stars. Jump down the wiki hole. Fun fact, with a little game show twist as you try to guess how to get from one disparate topic to another. Thank you, Moxie.
That's very nice. And if you like our podcast, you'll probably like hers because you get more trivia.
Your Brain on Facts sounds awesome.
Our other review is from Less Adventurous, who's Katie from the podcast TFGIF. Fun and insightful, 5 stars. You know you've been there. You look something up on Wikipedia about a TV show you saw, and before you know it, you're knee-deep into reading about the Byzantine Empire. How? As these ladies demonstrate, it's really easy to get caught in a wiki spiral. This podcast makes the spiral more like a game, where you can try to figure out along with them how 2 seemingly unconnected subjects can be linked. It's fun, funny, and I always learn something new. Well worth a download and listen. Thank you, Katie.
Thank you,
that was
Katie.
Wonderful.
That's so nice.
And you can check out her podcast, TFGIF, about shows from the 90s. So thank you both for the great reviews. We really appreciate it. Listeners, if you leave us a review, we'll read it on air. So get on there and leave us one.
That's our episode. Tune in next time for another 6 Degrees of Wiki. You can keep up with us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at 6 Degrees of Wiki.
If you enjoyed this podcast, you can support the show by leaving a review, buying 6 Degrees of Wiki merch like t-shirts, mugs, and bags, or even by donating directly to the show at 6degreesofwiki.com. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week.